Good evening, everyone. This is the June Land Use Committee meeting for Community Board 9. It's our final meeting of the year. So thank you to all of my committee members for sticking with us through what has been a difficult but hopefully rewarding year. You know, we're a diverse board with diverse opinions. But I think when we all work together, we can create something that is bigger than just a collection of special interests. And you know, I'm really proud of the work that we've done, and I hope that in that spirit we'll move forward to try to complete our final and very important goals, which include passing a statement for the board on the Charter Revision Commission's proposed changes to the ULURP process and revisions to our zoning framework. We'll start with the Charter Revision Commission statement. I've drafted a proposal based on some of the things that we've talked about in the past, and some of you also have some changes. You gave individual testimony. We should talk about including those points. We'll move approval of the minutes to the end of the agenda, and we're also going to add some new business items on Vital Brooklyn after the zoning framework discussion. So
we're on Facebook, not YouTube, because people are trying to watch. People are texting me.
Okay, so to start with, does anybody have any questions about this draft statement on the charter for the Charter Revision Commission proposals? And by the way, the Charter Revision Commission has not actually proposed anything. Those proposals are likely to come out in July. They've heard public testimony and they put together a report summarizing some of the proposals. And so this is kind of the time when we as a board can have some input and some influence on what the final proposals are likely to be. And a couple of other boards I know of have already commented. Needless to say, they're basically saying, no, we do not want these changes to ULURP.
Should we, since the people who may be watching don't have copies of this, should we read and discuss it as we go along?
Sure, okay. So, whereas the mayor has convened a Charter Revision Commission, which will propose ballot referendum measures for November 2025, that means all of you as individuals are going to be voting on something in November. So this is actually very important. And heard public testimony on reforms to the ULURP, which is the Uniform Land Use Review process related to housing production in February and March of 2025. And whereas the Charter Revision Commission has received numerous proposals from members of pro-housing group lobbying groups, affordable and for-profit developers, certain elected officials, and others seeking to shorten the ULURP process or increase the influence on development approvals of the mayor, borough presidents, city planning commission, or newly created individual roles at the expense of the community boards and council members. And whereas the Charter Revision Commission received testimony from numerous members of the public, including CV9 residents, members of neighborhood-based civic and preservation organizations, heads of other community boards, and representatives of labor unions who oppose such changes. And whereas the Commission released a preliminary report on April 30th, 2025, recommending that in seeking to address long timelines in the land use development process, resulting in insufficient production of housing that meets the needs of New York City residents, and localized opposition to housing and affordable housing in certain districts, resulting in inequities in housing production among all the community districts in the city, the charter should nevertheless, quote, foreground basic planning principles and keep the following considerations in mind. The necessity of land use procedure to support planning, oversight, transparency, democratic accountability, and public participation. The goal in the land use process is to allow for change while balancing competing goods, goals, and valid perspectives. The effects of change to land use procedures are rarely straightforward. These processes exist within a dynamic political context that adapts and responds to new circumstances. The charter exists within a broader structure of state and federal law that grant authority to the city, but also limit it. And whereas most developments encountered by CB9, which submit rezoning applications for affordable housing, have 3 to 5 year or more total development times. Okay, let me just stop there and just ask if anybody has any questions about what I read up to there, because that's just basically outlining what's going on.
I think you should explain also in layman terms for those that are watching that can't see, from where you read from here to there.
Okay, so this is really important because you're all going to be voting on these proposals in November.
Yes.
And it's going to determine how much influence you as a community can have via your community boards in the land use process, and how much influence your elected council members will have on the land use process. Why is this important? Any development that comes up in your neighborhood, any type of rezoning, is approved via this process. So basically right now there's a lot of jockeying going on to see who can influence the process the most. And it is up to you, the voters, to decide who you feel most represents your interests. Your elected council member, the borough president, the mayor, the city planning commission, a majority of whom are appointed by the mayor, your community boards who are appointed by both the borough president and the council members, and where, you know, this is basically, the community board is basically your only forum for direct community input into this process. And let me just say also that we're advisory, so, you know, further limiting or diluting our influence seems, well, I'll hold the editorializing until later.
Well, so basically, they're trying to take away the power from city council and the community boards and put it into whose hands?
No, they're trying to take it away from the community boards and put it into the elected officials' hands.
Mayor,
Which ones,
which
it's
one?
yet to be
the
determined.
the
But
borough president,
borough
yeah, the borough
president
president,
and the mayor.
yes.
So
gain
let me
the
just
power.
also just very quickly review the ULURP process. When a developer requests changes to the existing zoning laws for a new development, or when there's a sale or disposition of city-owned land, it needs to go through the ULURP process, which begins with, well, okay, so they have to submit an application to the Department of City Planning. There is then what is known as a pre-filing period, followed by a pre-certification period. There is not a timeline. There is not a time limit on that period. It, in some cases, is months. In many cases, it's years. Once the Department of City Planning, who are their civil servants, it's not an elected or appointed body, approves the application for technical correctness, the application is then certified, and that begins the land use clock. Once the land use clock begins, the community board has 60 days to review and vote on the application. Our opinion is advisory, but our recommendation is recorded and it is sent on to higher levels, and it is usually taken into account somewhat. So then the next body to vote on it is the borough president and the borough board. The borough board is composed of the heads of all the community boards, the council members, the council members for those boards, and the borough president. So the borough president then has another 30 days in which to issue an opinion. Following that, the city planning commission votes, and also typically the city planning commission will hold some type of environmental review with a public hearing prior to that vote. So after the city planning commission has, I think, 60 days to vote. After that, it goes up to the city council, and they then also have 60 days to vote. So actually, I think it's wrong that the ULURP I said here the ULURP process was only 6 months. It's 7 months when you count the borough president's review period. So I should fix that. But so there are changes being considered to this process, and so once it gets to the council, their vote is final. Everybody else's vote is essentially advisory, although I think a city planning commission veto can, correct me if I'm wrong, a city planning commission veto sends the project back. But their approval doesn't necessarily mean the project will be approved. It's really the council who has the final say, followed by the mayor, who can veto something that the council approves, but the council can override that veto with a 2/3 majority. So the council is really the most powerful body in this process. And there's a tradition called member deference, where if a member wants to vote a certain way on an application in their district, members frequently go along with their opinion. So that's something
assuming that they know their neighborhood and that their priorities for that.
So that is something that is being challenged with some of these proposals to change ULURP, although member deference is not a law, it has been a long-standing council tradition. So that's the explanation.
And the revision, which was about 4 years ago, actually gave more supposedly input to the community board, because our timeline typically started after the process. We were now supposed to be given the applications and the information prior to final certification, so that we could have some input and some influence before the deals were cut. But that's been challenging, because we were one of the first, Franklin Avenue was one of the first projects to test that theory. We were one of the first ones to be certified after that, and the developers held on to the applications, didn't give us the final application, saying that they're still working on it. So even though we were supposed to get information, we didn't really get a lot of information before the final certification. So it's still, but at least the intent was there, we still need to work on that process. But now with this revision, it looks as if they're trying to take us back out of the process again.
And just to know,
Excuse me,
That's
Susan,
the-
how much time
oh,
are we
sorry.
gonna need?
Let's try to wrap this up by 8 o'clock,
Well,
but we may not.
community boards were originally created to engage in this ULURP process. That was our main
I
Our
think
main
that's very key to know.
reason
Yeah.
for the creation of community boards.
That's
We
very key to
invested
know.
in this
Yeah.
process originally.
Makes sense.
So why would they take away that power and disenfranchise us?
That's like someone else saying, I know what's best for you, like
That's
what
what
they're
they are
doing with
saying.
me with Vital
The board president's opinion is that binding or is also advisory?
It's advisory.
It's also advisory, but I think somebody said that
Here's where we
a no vote from the borough president and a no vote from the community board means that a 2/3 majority of the city planning commission is required to pass the.
But that would be a straight no, and that's why we've had that contention with straight no versus no with conditions. A straight no by the community board and a straight no by the borough president should somewhat stop the process or make it much more difficult for city planning to pass it. So that's why when you do a no with conditions, you're giving yourself a little loophole for them to pass it.
I mean, I don't like the fact that city planning can override these things because they don't represent anybody. They're good for the mayor.
Yeah, it's true.
It's, I mean, for technical purposes, yeah, I understand.
So,
You have to vote,
before we get onto the discussion of, various proposals, why don't I just finish reading this?
Where did this quote come from?
That comes from the Charter Revision Commission's report. I just took it directly from them. So, and whereas most developments encountered by CB9 which submit rezoning applications for affordable housing have 3 to 5 year or more development timelines total development timelines, while the ULURP process is limited to 6 months, I'm gonna fix that to 7. A predictable and tiny fraction of this total time, and that proposed changes to the ULURP process, for example, combining the borough president and community board review periods, would shave at most 1 month off this 5-year timeline. And whereas we have approved at least 2 developer-initiated upzonings, which have resulted in no development at all after 10 years, proving that zoning and land use approval procedures are not the primary obstacle to housing development. And so actually John had asked that I specify which those are, and those are, there was the Empire Boulevard rezoning going back to 2009, and I'll have to look up exactly.
Further up on Empire, that's Empire.
I'm sorry, not 2009, 2014. This was Empire, past New York Avenue. I'll have to look up the exact address, but it was the kosher supermarket. So this happened under, before MIH was passed. And it was upzoned from an R5 to an R7A. And since then, it was a large supermarket and several houses, several single-family houses. And since then, no development has actually taken place.
And it's just an empty lot, right?
No,
No.
their supermarket isn't, the
Oh, that's a
kosher
different
supermarket
building.
is
But it's for sale now.
existence.
Empire in New York.
It's Empire, New York and Brooklyn. It's like the supermarket's there,
No, it's for
Brooklyn
sale
and
now.
Kingston, yeah.
Brooklyn and Kingston.
Yeah,
They're trying.
Oh, it is?
That was associated, they used to be associated.
no.
but it's a kosher supermarket.
Right, but I'm saying, it used to be associated supermarket.
No,
No, the
associated by no strip.
No, there was
There's
another
there's
associated.
traffic light
There's an
there.
associated between Brooklyn and Kingston, and that's where the Empire Kosher.
Oh,
Okay.
that was an associated, that must have been a
I
while.
I remember growing up as a kid.
Okay.
I remember.
Okay,
Yeah.
So, I don't know a lot about this rezoning, it was when I first joined the board. I do know at the time that some of our members, including our august chair, were demanding affordable housing, and at that time, there was no MIH, so they told him, no, all you can do is vote yes and ask nicely for affordable housing and hope they give it to you. But anyway, that happened, and I believe it was a developer requested upzoning, although I do not, a requested upzoning by the landowner, although I do not know that for sure. But in any case, nothing has happened since then. And then the second area where there was a substantial upzoning via variance was 341 Troy, which all of you discussed. And although, normally we don't talk about variances in this context, because it was such a significant increase in the buildable square feet, I think it's worth thinking about it in that lens. And it's been 15 years since they got their first grant of that variance, and nothing has really happened.
341 Troy is across the street.
341 Troy is the corner of Troy and Carroll. It's the big vacant lot. It's a big vacant lot, and they've been trying to do something for 15 years. The VSA and the board approved their upzoning in 2009 or 2010 initially, and since then they've been going back and forth, changing their plans and this and that, and absolutely nothing has happened.
And they changed their design again.
Yeah.
Design changes.
So, okay, so
They
that's
came
that.
to us one time.
Yeah, they came
recently.
earlier this year.
So
Yeah.
I will add the 2 specific addresses. That's a good suggestion.
Okay, this for
And
the
that
second
part
paragraph?
of Empire was already mixed, already had residential on it, so it's residential, commercial mix already, they were just looking to go a little higher from an R5 to
That was
R7.
320 Troy, you said?
341 Troy.
341 Troy. And what was the other one?
The Empire Boulevard rezoning, I don't know the exact
New York
address,
Avenue.
but I
What's
think
on the
it's
corner?
between I think you're right, it's
Brooklyn,
between Brooklyn and Kingston.
Yeah,
And that kosher supermarket is for sale.
Wow, so
Yeah.
maybe something is gonna happen.
Oh, I'll send you the information. It's not-
Okay,
Can,
There's multiple
one
addresses.
request I'd like to make is that
yes,
when you were talking about the chain of command basically for the
Yes.
decision making, it would be just really nice to have some sort of to be more clear here, because,
so you want me to add a paragraph to the whereases
or maybe
to
like
explain
make
that?
it just a little,
Example portion, like just a
yeah,
example
like just
paragraph?
like a maybe not a paragraph, but like something that's like the chain of, maybe it shouldn't be called chain of
graph?
command,
A
but just
graph of
like,
the
you
chain?
know, how it goes, like, you know, like the community board, like
Like the graph.
CB9, then it goes to borough president, like however it
Like
goes.
a family.
Okay,
Okay,
city
so
council.
add a paragraph describing ULURP timeline.
Or the
Um,
process of who
Okay.
sees it, because
Right.
Because that's part of what's looking to change.
Add a paragraph describing
how it is now.
the ULURP, the current ULURP timeline and who and approvals. Okay, that's a good point, so I
You gotta get,
will,
yeah, it
That
has to be
that
100%.
needs to be super clear.
It has to be 100% accurate though, Suki, because
Okay.
if there's an error or something's added or something's missed,
Okay.
they will dismiss the whole thing.
okay,
I think it's
okay.
that dangerous,
Fine
but
line
it's
to
not
do
a great, I don't,
Well, it's on
it's being
their
directed to
website.
people, right,
People-
it's being
So
directed
how
to
about
people,
this?
this whole thing is going to people who know what they're talking about.
Okay, so how about
So
this?
it's not like, we're not talking to general public who don't know the
We are
process.
talking to the
These are-
general public,
Well-
Currently, but not this document.
Okay, so how about
That's what
this?
we're talking about, this
After,
document.
could
so
we
how-
make like a,
Guys.
I don't think it's necessary.
guys, how about this? After we get through the whole thing, I'm gonna take a couple minutes to actually write the paragraph, and you can all, you know, like get in your phones and confirm that it's 100% correct, and then we're gonna vote,
Can I,
okay?
what if we just copy it from the website?
Yeah.
Like just copy it and just,
That's fine,
Cool.
but let's get through the
Yeah, yeah,
main
yeah.
thing first,
Yeah.
and then at the end, we'll do
Yeah.
that specific language. Okay. And whereas the community board's existing review period of 60 days is barely enough to announce and hold a public hearing and hold votes at both the land use committee and general board, as the charter and our bylaws require us to do. And whereas Community Board 9 has deep concerns about the lack of environmental review and appropriate allocation of city resources for services and capital improvements to our district, given the more than 4,500 units of housing we have added, mostly through asset-right development, since 2010, on top of having the highest population density of all community districts in Brooklyn, with relatively limited private resources, given our median household income is below the median for the city. Now, did somebody have a change here that they've,
Yeah, I don't know the exact wording, but there's a lot there.
That's best.
it's an awkward sentence, it's
Yeah, I
very
was-
nice.
I don't know, I think it's pretty good. I appreciate
I mean,
that.
if you have a grammatical change that's better, I'll happily accept that, but
Yeah,
just
I
think
think
about it, just think about it.
It's a long sentence.
This says
Okay.
a lot of
It's a lot of
stuff.
Oh, it speaks to me.
Okay.
This resolution, I don't know, these resolutions
Okay, I know one thing,
format is very
so,
challenging.
given more than 4,500 units of housing we have added since 2010, move that before the parentheses, that would help.
I have a comment that could be a language change, but
Okay,
it's sort of general.
sure.
Because this resolution, as it's written, focuses on sort of the discussion that happened in the planning commission around the timing for ULURP, for the current ULURP process being too long. And I think accurately, you know, pointing some of that blame at our community boards. That being said, I heard a lot more discussion there about sort of member deference, and also because we go on to talk about fair share in this document.
Right,
You know, there was a lot of discussion of the ways that the ULURP process has been used by different community boards to create the situation that we're in now, where we have, you know, 4,500 new units of development since 2010, and others maybe have even less, like affordable units than they did comparing to 2010. And so I think we should grapple with that a little bit in this. You know, I think it makes sense to point out the ways that shifting the community board's role is not necessarily saving any time. But I do think I heard a lot of discussion of the member deference piece being a big challenge, and also just the ULURP process being used by more connected community boards to block everything. And so, you know, if our vision is to become one of those community boards, then so be it. But I do think that that's where the impetus for the Charter Revision Commission came from, and so, would wanna speak to that. Would we wanna, I think we need to further define fair share if we're gonna reference it in here, or we need to just state plainly that our position is communities that haven't built anything need to be where this new development is happening, at least for a period.
I would echo Josh's point
Yeah.
quickly, is that
So
I
Max
That's
sense,
a fair share, right.
You
Yeah.
sent some language, can I read it?
yeah, by all means.
Okay, so what Max sent was, while Brooklyn Community District 9 has produced over 4,000 new units of housing from 2010 to 2023, many affluent districts in New York have not done their part in the crisis. For example, the Upper West Side produced 0 units of affordable housing in 2024, and the Upper East Side produced fewer than 50. We are supportive of policy fair housing mandates, which will rectify this fundamental imbalance and ensure that affordable housing production is equitably distributed throughout the city, so Central Brooklyn no longer has to do more than its fair share.
I don't know about the usage of the word affluent, because some districts are being blocked not because of their affluence, their class, it's for other reasons.
Like what?
Like in deeper Queens and in deeper Brooklyn, like South.
So I would be maybe a little more precise there. My view is that
But
if
it's
it's,
political power then,
Yeah.
they're able to block it.
my view
Because of their council.
is that if it's, say, Manhattan below 110th Street, let's say, that's like affluent and a lot of them are blocking housing, or like, Bay Ridge, for example, is upper middle class and has built very little housing. So those are like 2 small examples that I think do thread the needle there and would be appropriate to have some form of an enforceable mandate.
Yeah.
Upper East Side, they have so much.
Do we know exactly, I mean, if we're talking about how much housing we've built from 2010,
Yes.
guys,
Yes.
if we're talking about how much housing that we've built from 2010 to 2023, and we're talking about the lack of affordable housing in other districts, do we have the numbers on A, how much affordable housing we built from 2010 to 2023?
I go.
And B, what are the numbers of affordable housing that some of these other districts built over the same time period, right? Because it's not really fair to look only at what the Upper West Side did in 2024 if they may have done more in the 2010 to 2023 period, right? I mean, like I was just hearing about some supportive housing development that they've created in a repurposed, I don't know, like hotel or something like that on the Upper West Side. So I know it's not over a somewhat longer period of time, it's not 0.
They have a lot of affordable housing.
And I don't think it's 0 on the Upper East Side either. I think where it is very likely 0 is Bay Ridge. I mean, they've just built so little housing, and I'm pretty sure they've built 0 affordable
Right.
housing. Although I
So-
think that that's changing. I think that may be changing.
So we've built in this, it's broken down by council district, so this is imperfect.
Yeah.
But like in Rita Joseph's council district, there were 2,300 affordable units, 2,300 affordable units from 2014 to 2023.
Okay.
In Crystal Hudson's district, it was 3,911. On the Upper East Side in Julie Manning's district, it was 488
Okay.
over a 10-year period.
Okay.
Where did you get that from,
This
Max?
is from the New York Housing Conference.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, yeah, like you can look on a
Okay.
deeper, if you look on a longer time scale, it's not 0, but it's,
Okay.
It's considered less.
yeah, comparatively less.
It's significant.
Okay, so we can include, like again,
Yeah.
like when we get through this, we can include some of that language under this paragraph, like maybe we'll break this up, right? We'll say, and whereas Community Board 9 has produced over 4,000 units, right, and then comparison with other districts, right? And then a second paragraph, okay,
Can I just make one point in it? This document then has to go to the community board for approval in this June meeting
Yeah,
before it can be sent out,
yes.
correct? I think we need to simplify this a lot. I don't think we can use the referendum type of approach to get this past the community board in an ad hoc meeting for June, when they're not that well versed on this.
That's why it's good to have more detail.
Okay,
You're right.
I just think, they're not gonna, we can barely get through this, and we know, we've been doing
okay,
this.
I mean, you know, we'll get through this, we're almost through this,
If we just wanna have our voices
Okay,
on
so
record
we'll.
before the summer,
So hang
which I think is
on,
what you're doing.
hang on, okay, so we'll make that one paragraph. And whereas Community Board 9 has produced over 4,000 units from 2010 to 2023, and whereas, you know, like, pick your other affluent district has done whatever they've done, right? And then a second whereas, the second paragraph, we can say, and whereas Community Board 9 has the highest population density of all community districts in Brooklyn, has relatively limited private resources, given our median household income is below the median for the city, and has deep concerns about the lack of environmental review and appropriate allocation of city resources for services and capital improvements to our district, right? So that kills two birds with one stone. We get Max's changes in and we make it less of a mouthful, right, Josh?
Sure.
Okay. So, and whereas Community Board 9 recognizes that the city as a whole needs to continue residential development to provide sufficient housing for expected future population, but treasures our stable and affordable residential community and our historic built context, and does not want to be responsible for shouldering more than our fair share of density and locally unwanted land uses, while receiving fewer resources than we need to handle our existing, and I think John had a change here, right?
Yeah, trying to simplify it.
Yeah.
Okay, so John, in our historic built context, which should not be sacrificed in the name of development for the sake of development. Although, I kind of wanna keep the part about fair share and locally unwanted land uses, right? Cause I think, Cheryl, that speaks to a lot of your concerns.
And I was gonna say, your next paragraph, you have to actually substantially explain the reason why for the proposal, so, I mean, I know it is a lot, but you do have to be detailed, because that next paragraph, you have in capitals oppose any changes, and you have to really be detailed as to why. So I guess we really will have to
Okay, so,
shorten something, but
yeah, no, we can work on that,
Or group it to say background, whereas, and as a result, so that if somebody wants to skip the background, let me just see what their thoughts are.
right, okay, so that's an idea, what do other people think about, instead of putting all the whereases together, having the whereases, with the relevant resolutions? It's not our typical procedure, but it does make sense to me, cause this is long.
Should I put it in a separate document?
No, like, right, like, so we grouped all the whereases together, and then all of the therefores we resolves together, which is our typical procedure, but because of the length, Nicola is suggesting that we match each
Yeah.
therefore with the relevant whereases. I think that's a good idea.
Is that's a little confusing. It would be great to have somewhere in the document also like that CB9 needs to be exempt. We oppose and we need to be exempt due to, you know, what we can develop currently, and with the city of Yes, it's tremendous, you know, even before the city of Yes, how much
Well,
we
but
could.
this is
And I
the
think
voting
that's-
system.
ULURP process.
And I
Yeah, this
think
is the
that's-
voting right.
And I think that's
Good job.
exactly why I
Okay.
included that line in the paragraph just above to say that we don't wanna be responsible for doing more than our fair share of density and locally unwanted land uses. But to John's point, trying to simplify it, let's cross out while receiving fewer resources than we need to handle our existing density, let's just say, and does not want to be responsible for shouldering more than our fair share of density and locally unwanted uses.
Well, I think it's important to note we're not getting any funding for infrastructure that's gonna be needed for this, including.
So why don't we move that line up to the previous paragraph where we're saying, and whereas Community Board 9 has deep concerns about the lack of environmental review and city resources for services and capital improvements
Infrastructure.
to our district. For services and, okay, well, we can say infrastructure or capital improvements, doesn't matter.
You see your third paragraph, do we have to list who they received the testimony from? They know who they received.
Oh, so you're saying to take that out?
We don't need to tell them who
I
they
mean,
received.
I'm just saying this as a justification for what we're saying and doing, right? And I mean, what's particularly important to me is our CB9 residents have opposed this, right? Like you guys got up there and you said, I want this. I don't know, I mean, we could take it out if it's too long, but
They know, they know.
And they also did hear from not just those folks, they heard some people advocating for the traditional ULURP process in the 5 boroughs that they've done this in.
so.
But your statement is just to oppose. So you don't, if you can just cut that out and just say, receive testimonies from numerous and shorten everything.
I mean, I think this is just,
Who opposed?
the reason why is, from the public who opposed such changes. I mean, you know, I just really put it in here for us, right? Like when we take this to the general board, you know what I'm saying? Like,
To let them know how many people, okay.
to let them know what's going on. But what do the rest of you think? Should we take it out? Should we leave it in?
I think take it out.
Is it persuasive?
This
The
is
third paragraph, and whereas the Charter Revision Commission received testimony from numerous members of the public, right? So, but Cheryl, you're not talking about taking it out completely, you're just saying take out the specifics, right?
Yes,
They know.
you don't need to take it
They had
out,
a whole
because you
chart.
wanna let them know they oppose.
Yeah.
Numerous entities, groups, numerous,
So just take out members of the neighborhoods, that is too much? Lady unions opposed.
we're just trying to shorten as much as we can, and if we could just say, receive numerous testimonies from numerous different,
I wanna still include CB9 residents, cause that's
Yeah,
relevant to
definitely,
us,
that's
okay,
fine.
numerous members of the public, including CB9 residents, and take out the rest, what are the
I
rest
think
of you
that's
think?
okay.
I think that's
Take it
okay.
out or
Are
leave
we
it?
talking about
Some
both
change.
paragraphs?
Yeah.
Or just like, and whereas Charter Revision Commission has received numerous proposals, and whereas Charter Revision Commission received testimony from numerous members.
Of the public, including CB9 residents. I mean, I will say that I was struck by the testimony from the labor unions, I thought that was important.
Yeah, I agree, I remember that, there was a huge number of them that were there.
And
Like
when
200 or
when we went, there was another union. The second time when we went, there was another union who came, I think it was SEIU. So,
I was there,
yeah.
there was a lot of.
You guys, just wanna be mindful of time, because we said
Yeah,
we'd be done
it's
by.
7:53, thank you. So let's keep going. Let's keep going, because we're getting to the heart of this now. Therefore, Community Board 9 resolves that we oppose any changes to the charter which shorten the Community Board's ULURP review period, which is being unfairly blamed for long development timelines, or any changes which reduce the influence of our community via the community boards in the land use process, and increases the influence of individual elected officials or unelected officials at the expense of broader democratic bodies, including but not limited to combining the borough president's review period with the community boards, moving the borough president's review period after that of the council, allowing the city planning commission veto power over council votes, allowing developers to appeal council zoning votes to a small body of unelected officials. And here, I'm gonna add something of, other than through the current Board of Standards and Appeals process.
Under allowing developers to appeal?
So the way it works currently, right, is if you have a particular zoning on your land and you believe that you can't do what you need to do, right, with that particular zoning, right, that it's somehow doesn't take into account a special circumstance on your zoning lot, and you can't otherwise profitably use or develop the site, you're allowed to go to the Board of Standards and Appeals, which is a group of 5 professionals. They have expertise in engineering, architecture, finance, real estate, things like that. They're all appointed by the mayor, and you're allowed to go to them, and you're allowed to appeal your current zoning. But the rules are very, very strict. It's not like a rezoning where there's essentially a political determination that we want to change the use of the land for some public purpose. It really says, it's really just relief from a zoning scheme that was, where maybe they created an unintended circumstance. So you really have to show that there's something unique about your lot. You have to show that you're asking for the minimum possible relief, and specifically the minimum possible relief to earn a reasonable return on your investment. So, like, I'm okay with this, it's necessary actually to make zoning laws legal in the first place. But I think what they're talking about is, I didn't like the fact that the council, put an MIH zone on my land. I'm gonna, see if I can go to a group of 3 people, one of whom was appointed by the mayor, and see if I can get that undone. That's not the purpose of, the BSA process. And so I wouldn't want a different process other than the BSA process. Because the BSA process is really the minimum that's necessary to make zoning law as a whole legal, right? Because the Constitution doesn't allow us to just to do takings, to take valuable private property from private owners. But, if there's an out, if there's a variance, then that's allowed, right? But that process already exists, and so what they're proposing is an add-on process with a group of people that they would prefer, right? And it's not necessarily going to have the same strict restrictions that the BSA process would have.
And BSA stands for
Board of Standards and Appeals.
Do you wanna add that?
So I'm adding that to my own statements, that we don't want to allow developers to appeal council zoning votes except through the BSA process.
Can we also add except through a fair housing framework or the enforceable fair housing framework?
No, because the fair housing framework would be, right, why would you want them to appeal the fair housing framework?
No, except not appeal the frame housing
Oh.
framework. If someone is, we're going back to the Upper East Side, you need a way to appeal this, you have an enforceable mechanism. So that could be an enforceable mechanism. If the council member says, the Upper East Side council member says, I don't want affordable housing in my district, there should be a way around that, is my point.
Right, I think this is to the point of addressing that member deference problem.
So,
And that's why a
Right.
board would need to be implemented
Yeah.
that has some power to weigh in on that.
so I think, if we get to some of the later paragraphs here, my view of how this issue should be addressed is through a fair housing framework that has specific targets, right, for each district. And, right, that we should enforce it not through taking away somebody's zoning, but through doing a comprehensive plan that would allow them to meet those targets, right? And that goes through the normal ULURP process, because we can discuss this a little bit more as we read these, but essentially council member deference is not, it's really important to remember that it's not a law,
It's not,
So
but it
we
is,
really need
it
to,
is
but we really
the
need
practice.
to, but we really need to
It
think
is
about
the
why,
custom.
but
It's
we need
what,
to think
it's how
about
it
why
works.
that's, we really need to think about why that's the case.
But we can't,
Right.
if we have to, we can't just focus on this being a time saving thing, because it really isn't all about that. It is on its face about addressing this issue of, we have such a disjointed system that some places where they're able to organize in certain ways through their community
Right.
boards, through their council members, they're able to block everything. In other places, just everything gets built there. That's what this is about.
But let
So-
me ask you a question, John.
so if we're talking about a fair housing framework, which makes sense, I have a question. What is the definition of a sort of fair share, right? What are we using as like the baseline to decide that, right? Is the baseline status quo and then we're building on from there? Who knows if that would actually address the housing issues? Do we think that planning would actually use baseline or the status quo as the baseline for coming up with something like that? We don't.
Those are
So,
all really good questions. Can I finish reading some
But
of this?
then,
'Cause I
but we
think that-
can't just implement what you've made up stuff that,
Doesn't exist.
okay, we can put it in, but we have to have a discussion about it. I mean, we could put whatever we want in here.
Can I just finish
Okay,
reading this and
finish
then
it.
we can have it, because I think these are all really good points. And also resolves that we support citywide comprehensive planning, which mandates environmental assessments of all districts at least once every 5 years, and ties these results to resource allocation to each district, given citywide budgets, strategies for economic and human capital development, and mitigations and solutions to quality of life problems caused by overdevelopment and density or concentration of locally unwanted land uses. So,
Can we spell that out? Well, because I have
Yes.
no idea what
I
that
have no clue what.
I was like, what is a little low?
okay,
It's like the meaning, like what is the meaning?
okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so, essentially what the issue is here is we have all of these developments that are not subject to environmental review, or the environmental review is extremely weak, and we get nothing. We get no mitigation, we get no resources, nothing. So if they're gonna push citywide comprehensive planning, let's tie it to environmental review of every district, and more frequently than, so that at least we get some environmental review and we get the recognition that, these these state developments that never went through ULURP, that they're creating problems, that, all of this stuff that's coming up, that's been coming up on Franklin Avenue, one by one, and each one says negative environmental impact, but when you put it all together, it's a huge number of units. In my part of the district, somebody who lives on Clarkson, like west of New York Avenue, almost 1,000 units are coming up there too. So,
And a new one today.
that's right. So, let's at least, and this is something that I think many council members are concerned about, that there's no process to tie the resources to the development that's coming. There's no, that there's no recognition that some districts have done a lot more than others. In some cases, what happened as a result of rezonings was unexpected and was not predicted or recognized by the environmental review that happened then, like in downtown Brooklyn. They thought it was gonna be like, half office buildings and half residential, it turned out to be all residential. And there are so many issues that are being created by that density, and, I think they wanna see some, something out of that. So, this is something
We are
that
out of time.
I'm hopeful, we can get some support from, and that we might be able to get something done at some level. So,
I'm concerned too, this
Yeah.
is like, we support citywide comprehensive planning. That might disempower our particular community board, like, we should have,
should we say citywide and district level?
I don't know.
I think you gotta make a
Comprehensive
decision. That's what
planning
this whole
is
thing about.
dangerous, it's dangerous.
Here are all the challenges, where do we wanna go forward from, so. You can, yeah.
Comprehensive.
I don't like it. I'm just based on the history, I'm not sure what we're signing ourselves up for and we're saying we're supporting.
I
We
mean,
have
let's
no
put
idea
it this
what
way,
we're
the city currently does comprehensive plans, right? So like the last one that was done under de Blasio, like, it talked about
Well,
like, we wanna
Reynoso did
produce,
his own plan too, right?
what?
Reynoso did his own.
Yeah, Reynoso did one, the city does one, right? Like the last one under de Blasio, he said, we wanna build or preserve 360,000 units and 160,000 affordable units, and, you know, they talked about wanting, you know, to have like more biotech, you know, and this and that, and, right, so the city already does this kind of stuff. What's being requested right now is that it goes along with fair share. And, you know, what I'm asking for here is that it's tied to the environmental assessments, right? Right now, like the existing SECRA process, state SECRA and city SECRA processes do not, you know, they're not helping us, because all of our most of our development is as of right. You know, a lot of times it's not cumulative, when these rezonings are happening one by one, right? So we're not getting the opportunity to say, this is the enormous amount of development that's coming, these are our existing challenges, these are the resources that we need, this is the mitigation that we need, right? And so that's why I'm saying that the comprehensive planning is already there. You're not gonna stop them from coming out with a plan that says we have this target for this number of housing units. What we can do is say, but it should be tied to environmental assessment, but it should be tied to fair share, right? That's,
I'd like to put in a governor, meaning that if they have a mandate for a district in the city to produce certain amount of units, you know, affordable housing, whatever, that if a district accomplishes 10% of it, they should not be required to add
Already.
any more until everybody else puts in their 10%, and then you can go ahead and ratchet it up, then you go ahead and put 20%. It shouldn't be in a case where we've done 100% and nobody's done 5% or 10%.
So we
I
should be
would-
exempt, those places should be exempt until more is created.
Yeah, but basically that's the idea, that these plans should be staged, so that if a district goes ahead and implements, you know, 10% or 20% of their requirement, that every single district in the city has to go ahead and meet that before that district needs to go ahead and create any more.
okay, so let me finish reading and you'll see where I'm going with this, right? That's, some of that might be, you know, a moot point. Okay, and that we support a citywide 10-year fair share framework requiring every district to contribute an equal share by percentage increase of the district's existing housing stock of housing production to the city's need for sufficient housing for its expected future population. Okay, and that such fair share targets and broader perspectives on development should be enforced in ways that center oversight, transparency, democratic participation, and community-based planning, such as encouraging borough boards to vote on individual ULURP applications during their separate review periods, providing resources to communities to create their own comprehensive plans, limiting the pre-certification and pre-filing review periods for rezonings with the Department of City Planning without reducing environmental review or other technical requirements, and for districts which fall short of fair share targets by a wide margin and fail to create their own comprehensive plans to increase housing and affordable housing production, having the city create a comprehensive plan for those districts, which would go through the normal ULURP process. So, okay,
That's
Now-
too many words.
First, what was Lulu's?
locally unwanted land uses, that's basically things like the homeless shelters. Okay, so Joshua,
Yes, so I think, I don't know, maybe I just don't know enough about fair share framework. But as we've defined it here, I don't think this is a sufficient or clear enough definition. And don't think it achieves what we're trying to say, which is that this neighborhood has done a lot, others have done little, do it there.
Yeah.
Right? It's trying to find a, I don't wanna say evasive, but a clean way to say that. And I think you should just state that, if that's the position of this board. If we're talking about the city entertaining this idea of a fair share framework, I think we have to do some more work in terms of how we potentially define fair share? What are other factors that could go into there, other than just the percentage increase in the district's housing stock compared to others? Because that's using the status quo as the baseline, which I don't think anyone would argue that the status quo is sufficient. Right?
It's not, and I think that he's right, I think that a lot of this can be just simply said exactly that way, that we've done our share.
Yeah, and I don't think we
And
should
I-
say
and-
that we support that.
We've done our share, and we should not, and we should not consider any further development in our district until the rest of the city catches up.
While that's not the position I think we should take, I think that's what we're trying to say here in nice language, and
But
if
it
that's
is-
what's trying to be said, then just say it.
Yeah, but it is exactly what we're trying to say.
Yeah, we
Is
have
that
to be detailed.
we paid our dues. All these buildings that are built here that are actually market rate are not really increasing, you know, the ability to have people be in houses that they can afford. So why put more buildings here? So let's just say it.
Well, we already have the
Buildings
ability
woke
to
up.
do so much here with the current zoning in the city of Yes. It's extraordinary how much development we can do and will be coming and is happening right now. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of units you just see going up, right? And we can do way more, and it's gonna happen, and unfortunately, we're under a lot of pressure because of it, so.
Let me put it to you this way. Past comprehensive housing plans have said things like the city, we have a goal of 360,000 units, 160,000 affordable units, okay? We have mayoral candidates, a number of them are saying, I want 500,000 units over the next 10 years, I want 1 million units over the next, I don't think that person is gonna win, but, you know, a number of them are saying, are using the 500,000 number. There's a leading candidate who's using 200,000 rent stabilized units, okay, so we have these targets out there. Every mayoral candidate has a Democratic mayoral candidate has a target, okay, so, you know, we could say something along the lines of, you know, every district needs to contribute a fair share, taking into account past housing production as well as you know, an equal share or of
Current.
future housing production, but you know, where I'm sort of coming from is I'm pretty sure that we're gonna continue to do thousands of units of housing no matter what we do, right? And you know, just an update to all of you guys, right, we heard that the Empire Kosher Supermarket is being sold, the Rite Aid on Bedford Avenue is going through a
Closing.
bankruptcy sale. Okay, all of Rite Aid, the whole company is going through a bankruptcy sale, so that's another big lot that's potentially sold for development. It's,
With a possible.
And that
You can
huge
build-
lot on Bedford across from Major Owens, that was supposed to be a hotel, is for sale,
yeah,
bankruptcy sale
so
right now.
these are
That
all,
sign too,
you know,
Bedford and Eastern.
an eastern part, so, you know, some of them are not as of right residential development, but the Rite Aid is, you know, there's a lot of possible as of right development due to City of Yes. There, you know, the Empire Kosher Supermarket is as of right under a relatively high density zoning, so we're gonna get all of this, and then you heard about the Alembic, the supportive housing, they're building as of right. So there's gonna be, I'm confident that we're gonna be building thousands of units going into the future.
But what we need to address here,
Market and affordable,
but what we're trying to address with this,
right.
It's
is
not
this
that.
So
question.
the question
We know that
is,
that's
so the
coming, so
question,
we need
so
to
the
propose
question,
this.
so the question is, what is our fair share, right? And if we wanna say that what we're going to build is at least our fair share, right? But then we have districts that are basically build like less than 1,000 units.
So
over
we
the
should
last
be
10 years.
exempt.
There's also some
Okay, but we're
districts-
getting away from what they're trying to do with this, because I was just looking at the report again, because I was getting myself we're all twisted up. Okay, so they're proposing 3 buckets of changing. We can reduce processing cost, we can elevate citywide needs, we can leverage public land use. Those are their big buckets of changes to the ULURP process.
So here's where I'm going, because Joshua, you're
Elevate
talking
citywide
about,
needs.
Joshua, you're talking
And
about
that's
how do we,
That's giving more power to the
You're
Speaker of the House and.
so Joshua was talking about how do we get past member deference and how do we enforce some kind of fair share? Because this is something that people are trying to do with these charter reforms,
Come
right?
up with a definition that could be enforced.
And so I do not think that member deference is the right place to target because it is not law in the first place, right? The right place to target is the fair share framework, right? Is to create legislation that says explicitly everybody has to do their fair share, and your fair share is going to be at least, as much as everybody else, right? As much as everybody else. Right?
I hear what
I
you're
think-
saying.
The only thing that
No,
I
go ahead.
can say is that fair share isn't always relevant for some districts that are, say, on the seaside front because of potential flooding. They shouldn't be building these high rises at all. That should be changing.
And
I think trying to.
apart from the walkaways.
I think we should
right?
let
I think-
Max speak.
That's
for a
fair.
second.
No, I think trying to
Yeah.
square the circle
Yeah.
here, here's what I
Yeah.
think is fair, is you have the fair share framework, right? They're gonna come up with a number for every community district, we can bracket what that number is. I think that when that number comes out, you have to have a way to make it so it's not just a number on a piece of paper. There has to be a way that that number is actually achieved, right? You can't just say the Upper East Side has to build 1,000 or 2,000 affordable units, which comes back to Josh's point, which is that you need an actual mechanism to enforce this, right? And if the council member can still just say no to everything, then you don't have a mechanism to enforce it. So you do need something to get around the member deference issue. I appreciate it is a custom rather than a law, but we have very creative lawyers in New York who work for the city government, and I think they could come up with a law that would enforce the Upper West Side or Upper East Side making more than 400 affordable units in 10
And
years.
that's the fair share framework, right? Because that's essentially, if a fair share, the council passed the fair share framework, right? So now the question is, when those targets come out, and again, it's a question of what those targets should be and who, is gonna come up with those targets. But when those targets come out, right, presumably, the council as a body is going to support their enforcement, right?
That's- I don't think that that's true at all.
That's not true at all.
The council voted a few years ago to close Rikers Island.
Yeah.
And
Rating ticked
it's
out.
the biggest population in Rikers since like the mid 2010s.
And they're
Yeah,
building
I
all
mean-
those jail towers.
They're
They're
expanding on
They're
Rikers right
expanding,
now.
they're
Yeah.
fixing
Right?
it.
But
the council-
they're building that jail tower in downtown Brooklyn.
Yeah.
They
They're
sure
building
are,
it.
but they were
And in
supposed to be there in
Chinatown.
2 years, and we all know that's not happening. The council recently expanded the city theft voucher with no funding attached, which means no one extra is getting city theft vouchers, right? And so, we do have to do something about the stated goal, the sort of custom versus what's happening on the ground, right? And
And I would just add
So-
just add one thing quickly. If you look at who voted for the fair housing framework, you guys know who Joe Borelli is. He's like the head of the Republican Party in
Yeah.
council.
Yeah.
He voted for it because he knows it's unenforceable. It's just a number on a piece of paper. You think he's voting for this stuff because he cares about it? He's voting because he knows it's unenforceable. That's the whole problem. It's and it's unenforceable. The council knows it's unenforceable.
And the idea of some kind of body that we have to think about how this separate body from the council would be composed.
Right.
Theoretically, they're being appointed by people who stand for election every 2 and 4 years, or every 4 years rather. And so, the idea that it's
Independent.
just a random group of folks, there is a democratic process in that.
So let me ask you guys a question. do you think the concept of fair share, as all of you guys have defined it, right, that it should take into account what a district has done before, that it should take into account whether a district is affluent and has the capability to support more density or not? Do you think that these are ideas that are supported by a majority of your fellow New Yorkers? Is it something that is like, could get a Democratic majority?
I think if it comes up to a vote for the public, yes.
Yeah,
I think if
public
it's the
opinion.
council member,
Yeah,
not necessarily, no.
That's the
and not provided
fundamental,
that they're well informed
and
about.
that's the fundamental problem, right, is if you believe that these are ideas that make sense to a majority of people and a majority of community districts or whatever, because I think it would make sense to a majority of community districts, because the majority of community districts have done a ton of development, right? And nobody's like too happy about the lack of infrastructure and, lack of affordability and so on. So I think it makes sense to a majority. The question is why, when it comes to council votes, a majority of the council also doesn't behave this way.
Special interest,
Because they're, exactly.
special interest.
Turn out-
They're looking
Who's lining
out,
the pockets?
they're looking out for number one, and that's their political future, their political path.
Also,
And
They
they're
don't care about
funding,
anything
they're
else.
funding.
Also, it's-
Special interest.
they're responsible to like their constituents, not to the city. Like the member from the Upper East Side, she's responding to
certain
the.
degree, to a certain
Sure,
degree.
but she's responding to a bunch of like 65-year-olds on the Upper East
Fine,
Side.
what about the other,
Yeah.
fine,
The
what
Upper
about
East
the
Side
other,
though has a lot of
What about the other-
medical facilities and a lot of commercial.
what about the other 50,
Interest
what about the other
that they
51
need
council
to
members,
concern
right?
themselves
There's
with.
52 council members. If a majority of the other 51 council members feel that the Upper East Side is not doing their fair share, why aren't they voting in favor
Well,
of?
because
They're
it's
not getting enough
different.
Because it's a custom,
They're not-
It's a custom of member deficit.
yeah, it's
And
like,
they're not getting enough.
Again,
It's not, this
why?
custom is not something that is invented
It's political.
by the New York City Council. All legislative bodies have some version of it.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the federal government, there's like home state rule when someone is getting appointed from that state.
So what
Like
you're,
this is a
what you're
custom, it's a
essentially, I
thing,
feel
and we're
like,
trying to,
Okay, we're
okay,
going around
but,
and
we-
around. This is-
but
we're not gonna have a
guys,
resolution
guys,
tonight.
Alright, let's work on this. Instead of trying to solve all the problems in the world.
so we're not going,
Yes, Benny,
so I
Benny,
don't
Benny
think-
was
Just wanna say,
Yeah,
like,
go ahead.
I can see that like all these other, like this Upper East, West Side of East, all these other communities, if you're gonna talk to them about fair share, I can see them saying, oh, you know what, let's measure population density. And our population density is already much higher than yours, so therefore why should we be adding units?
which is exactly what's.
Fair share
happening.
causes
I mean,
studies.
there are a number of components to fair share. I agree. But I think this is a level of detail that's not gonna end up on this proposal.
okay, so I think that's actually a fair point. So
Because all they say is some kind of planning.
why don't we just say
And fast
contribute
tracking, which I
a
don't agree with.
fair share,
fast tracking, definitely not.
a fair share, taking into account past housing production as well as future housing pipelines.
Housing is getting developed pretty fast right now in this district, pretty fast, for
Okay,
these as of rights.
so
Okay.
is that something that we could support, to say that we would support a citywide 10-year fair share framework requiring every district to contribute a fair share of housing production to the city's need for sufficient housing for its expected future population, taking into account that district's past housing production as well as its future housing pipeline? Does that
Why
work?
do we have to have,
Can
that we
we-
support a
Environmental
citywide 10-year fair share framework, why do we have to have that in there?
Well, we're not, okay. Alright, so one bucket is elevating citywide needs. The suggestion is to include amending the charter to require more comprehensive approaches to planning. As well as that's the statement. As well as to enhance the roles of officials like the borough president and speaker of the council in the land use process.
Would it be
So-
okay to?
So what we're-
set-
All this detail
Okay,
is
so
not gonna end up on a ballot.
Let's go back to the paragraph 3 on this page, which is that we propose any changes to the charter which would shorten the community board's ULURP review period, or any changes which reduce the influence of our community, blah, 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 right? And so the proposals that are being made are, well, for 100% affordable housing, let's shorten the ULURP process. That is how they want to do the enforcement, right? They want to say, if it's 100% affordable, let's let them, not go through a council vote, or let's let them, go through a fast-track ULURP process,
And we say no.
right? And the reason, and one of the reasons I'm saying no is I think there's a better way to do that, and that's the fair share framework, right? So that in those districts that are rejecting affordable housing without a good justification, then, we have another remedy, right, which is for the Department of City Planning to come in and do a comprehensive plan for them that, rezones whatever they need to rezone, right? And the truth is, they already have the power to do that, right? But it's the fair share framework that's the key driver for all of this. And do you understand what I'm saying? Because
Yeah, I
otherwise
hear what you're
you
saying.
end up with a situation where basically it's developers driving things, right? We don't want developers. You do want comprehensive planning, and you do want to have like a community-based process that says, okay, we know we have to do this many units, and this is how we're gonna do it, looking at all of our needs, all of the environmental issues, right? Because yes, you have areas that are at flood risk, but even in those districts, apart from maybe the Rockaways, there's parts of those districts that are not in the flood zone, right? So it should be something that's driven by the community, as opposed to some developer buys a piece of land and this is I'm gonna be affordable, so I can just override your zoning without any say. That's not what I wanna see. I would rather see somebody sit down and look carefully at that district and say, this is where you could build some affordable housing, this is how you could do it, right? And if you have no interest in taking part in that process yourself, we are going to do it for you, right? And then you can vote, and, the council can vote. And we won't deal with the problem of number deference for now, because that seems to be kind of difficult to agree on.
I don't actually, because I don't think so, because we could just strip the,
But this
What
was
is it?
it, the comprehensive plan.
yeah, appointing a zoning, we could just strip any of the, proposals that are there to deal with member deference from this we oppose. Right, and I think the clearest one is probably the third bullet point you have there. But there are others that could, by allowing developers to build, I just don't wanna.
And I would just add, Nick, look at it's kind of buried in there, but there's a section about member deference in the,
That was the whole
Commission report.
discussion.
no, I know,
It
but
was
yeah,
a
look,
discussion, but in
the
when they
report,
talk
it's-
about the report and where
Yeah.
they bucket,
it's in the report.
It's called the,
It's just buried in there, which
in
is
your
a pain in the
proposal.
butt.
So what do you guys think?
Can I make a suggestion? If we were to keep fair share framework language in here, and I'm in favor of maybe taking it out, but if we were, could we say something like, and we support a citywide 10-year fair share framework requiring every district to contribute an equal share? Sort of changing that to say, we support the city developing a fair share framework that takes into account the sort of disparities in development and other relevant factors, or.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
but-
we were
but-
saying, that I think what I said was, we support a citywide 10-year fair share framework requiring every district to contribute a fair share of housing production to the city's need for sufficient housing, blah, blah, taking into account past housing production as well as its future housing pipeline.
but he's saying to say
Current.
it doesn't exist currently. This makes it seem as if there's a citywide 10-year framework that
Oh,
already
okay.
exists.
We support developing a citywide 10-year fair share framework, okay. So, okay, going back to the third paragraph, Joshua is suggesting that we eliminate bullet point 3. Thoughts
Allowing the
about
city
this?
planning commission veto power over council votes?
Like
What?
that, to say that we oppose that one.
I thought we opposed everything.
Yeah, we, I mean, my
Every bullet point is we oppose.
my draft is we oppose everything, but
I don't
Joshua is saying
necessarily
take out
oppose
bullet
that,
point. Okay.
so I'm saying
Okay,
to save us the time, we could
Okay.
just take the things out that would require
okay.
more discussion for now.
I wouldn't want the, city planning commission to be able to veto.
Yeah, I don't
I
think we
would
should
want
take
them to
those
be
out.
able to veto some council members from Bay Ridge.
I don't think that should
I
happen.
don't know, not the city planning commission, maybe.
No,
rest of
city
council.
command, so that means the mayor will run everything, no.
quite catch
City
that.
council's supposed to represent their local constituents, that's what we're voting for them.
To the city planning commission,
Mm-mm.
they don't represent us.
So this might be the right time to introduce, have
City-
these proposals,
City council,
everybody listen up.
city planning is not voted, it's just that one, it's a very small group of people that would control so much, and that's not right.
Guys, please listen to Hector's proposals, because these are important too.
Okay,
Hector's proposal is to give community boards more influence in the land use process by allowing them to vote to elect multiple members of the city planning commission and to reduce the number of members appointed to the planning commission by the mayor. What do you guys think?
It would be allowing others to appoint as opposed to the mayors, taking away power from them, so.
And
yeah.
specifically to allow us, the community boards, to elect one or more members to the planning commission.
I just wanna
Okay.
point out, this is the mayor's charter revision commission,
Yeah.
so like insofar
Yeah.
as like,
So
Yeah,
we
that's
want-
true,
so-
so insofar as we want
So how
providing
would we-
comments,
anything we
regardless of
provide,
merits of
we
it,
want.
like, this is
This
just,
is
you know,
just a
fluff at
request.
best. It's not saying it's a bad idea, but it's like,
So what?
it's not gonna be in there.
The
So
goal
what?
of this charter revision is to build more housing, and the mayor is on that side. The mayors usually, the mayors, whoever they are usually on that side. So
but we
I
want
think-
affordable housing, and that's not what's happening.
You know, I feel like that's one that
Okay, yeah,
will.
fine, so what? We'll put it in there and they'll say no, but it's out there and, there's another charter revision commission that's being appointed right now.
Did we
Would
hear
these
all
be like the
Hector's things?
in practice, this would be like the creation of a few more citywide seats that would run an election that only community board members vote on? Or like, how would this election work? Because I would imagine people would say, why not everyone in the city vote on who those votes are, not just the community board members?
Well, because the community boards are more, they're more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Plugged in.
Yeah, something like that. They're more in tune with what's really happening with the city. So you cannot expect the general public to just come in and say, hey, I wanna vote for this. And so it gives us that ability to be able to control some of what happens at that level. I mean-
Where's Hector's thing? I'm sorry, I just wanna read it.
There's more.
Yep, I passed on, don't worry.
Alright, go.
Wait, is it, I don't see, Hector,
This is for the,
That's why, my testimony, I wanted to look
where's your,
neighbors.
this is
Okay,
Hector,
so we're getting to that.
No, this is something else.
where's yours? I was
More
asking for
concentration of power of
Can
the
you-
line, the more corrupt it's gonna be.
Yeah.
People
Okay.
to the ground.
Can you do me a favor, Benny, can you write down your proposal and read it out after we talk about Hector's?
we don't have to, I don't even have a proposal
Can you say
Guys,
Hector's?
I mean, we're going
Guys,
around and
just
around in
go
circles, I
Hector's
cannot see how we're
No,
gonna
this
get
isn't
something
Hector's, this
approved
is something from
tonight.
Jay, it's not Hector's.
Oh.
This is completely
Wait,
different.
Oh,
okay.
you were reading Hector's.
Okay, so
Can you send it to, so I can read it on my phone?
it was posted to the Google.
It
Drive.
wasn't.
Oh, okay, maybe not, okay.
Yeah, the last thing was posted at 4:21.
It's an email that
Okay.
came. It was in the email thread.
Here's some
Shared it.
additional charter proposals from Hector. Increase the power/influence of the community boards by giving community boards a voting option for multiple members of the planning commission. reduce the number of members the New York City mayor can install. I'm sending it to me and I'm asking her to print it, but that's it. That's pretty simple, I think, you know, can we,
Straightforward. What is this yours?
can we vote on this change?
But I just wonder about a voting process. Joshua was saying, like, how would we vote?
Who would run? I mean, we're not getting into how, so, I mean,
We're not getting into how, and I don't think we'll be able to make a decision on this tonight, because there's just so many details. But I think it's something that can be put out there for a discussion. It doesn't have to be a suggestion. And if it doesn't seem to be able to be, having any traction here as a group, then so be it. But at least we'll have a chance to discuss
I
it.
personally like these proposals. I'll start with that.
It might be good for September to start off with. I don't know if we could add it in this right now, or we could talk about it right now.
Guys, what are your thoughts? Do you feel comfortable putting it in? Yes,
No.
no?
I'd have to consider all the implications, I'm not sure what other.
That's fair.
I like it.
Oh, you mean Hector's thing or just?
Hector's
oh,
proposals. Let's talk about Hector's
I
proposals.
stepped out, I shouldn't have gone.
Yeah.
Guys, Hector's proposals, increase the power/influence of the community boards by giving community boards a voting option for multiple members of the planning commission.
how
Two,
about
reduce the
a
number.
rotating position on the planning commission that is selected from one of the 50, or from the
That's
50
number
community boards?
Two, reduce the number of members the New York City mayor can install.
I agree with that.
I said 50 people can vote for one person to serve on a planning commission.
For the city planning commission?
So it'd
Okay.
be like 50 more people on the city, 50
How
more
big is the
people.
planning commission right now?
Planning commission is 13 members, 7 are appointed by the mayor, 5 are appointed by the various borough presidents, and 1 is appointed by the public advocate.
You have to understand, these people are appointed by people we elected. We went to the voting booth and selected them. And elected officials can't do everything individually, so appointing folks is a part of their power. Now, if we want to say maybe the borough president should have more, two, and those come from the 5 that's from the mayor. I mean, I think that feels more reasonable, but I also think it kind of makes sense that the mayor has a lot of people on the city planning commission.
Majority. Current mayor currently has the majority, 7 of the 13.
What do you guys think?
I mean-
I personally am in favor of reducing the number of members the mayor can install. I think it's been problematic.
Alright, that I would agree.
And who's
I
gonna
think
choose
13
the
is a lot.
community board?
And who's gonna
Choose
choose the
them,
gap?
right, who's going to?
There's 50 members and 50 community
I
boards.
like the idea of an additional public member. You know, I mean, the community boards is not a bad idea, but I'm open to other ideas. I just like the idea of an additional public member. Somebody that's kind of, the public at large has more of a voice in choosing.
That's the general idea.
I like, I said, having maybe the heads of the little chairs from the community boards,
That's
rotate.
interesting.
At once a month.
There you go.
But that would be 50. How many community boards are there total? 50. So that would be forever to get your turn
Yeah, it would.
You
So
have
you need
multiple
more than
ones
one.
simultaneously.
at a time.
Maybe you have like 5 at a time from different community boards.
Okay.
Rotate.
Mhm.
Okay.
Lotto.
Guys, Jay?
Yeah, I just wanted to just add a comment to amplify what Hector said in terms of pushing more power to the community boards. You saw what happened with City of Yes, where the community boards, the majority of them, the people said, we don't want it.
That's
And then what happens was, the council people turned around and said, oh yeah, we'll vote for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a disconnect between the people and everything, so I would amplify what Hector said, but I would add one more thing to it, to increase it, that the community boards be directly elected by the people according to the census tract areas, so that you could assure that it's the people who are voting,
Who has a
and
voice.
not necessarily somebody's getting appointed because they're involved with a certain political party.
Right.
Okay, so why don't we do it this way? Increase the power/influence of the community boards by giving community boards the option of voting for, well, that's what you said, actually, a voting option for, right? And it could be done in the way that you say, through a rotating position, or, you know, who knows, right?
Or a group at a time.
We'll leave it open. So it sounds like most of us like are good with this, yeah?
Good with having a local.
I think this should be a separate proposal entirely and
Well,
not,
this is a charter proposal, this is most definitely a charter proposal, so this is where it goes.
Maybe the highest level way to think about what we've been talking about is simply creating some, expanding the city planning commission to include seats that are filled directly from community boards. How they get filled, I think we can figure that out later. But the idea being that community boards need direct representation on the city planning commission, since they seem to be the body that's gonna be the most empowered.
And that exactly is the idea, is to have somebody in there, I don't care what number comes with that. But
The
having
voice.
the mayor
The voice
appoint,
of the people.
yeah, having the mayor appoint most of those seats is, we get screwed all the time.
It's ludicrous.
Community board should have veto power, that's all. The city planning commission, if they come up with a plan that the community doesn't agree with.
I think that's the concept, but we can't drill down right now as to how many folks from the community will be part of that, but I think that the framework will be that there's gotta be somebody in there. What that number is gonna be, I don't know. How is it gonna be chosen? I don't know. I think that's for another day, but that is the general framework.
Okay, so I'm gonna stick with Hector's original language, because like my brain is too fried right now to figure out how to incorporate your language. Bearing in mind that it's 99% certain we won't be granted this.
But it'll be out there.
But it'll be out there, okay? So, can we vote on the proposal as a whole? Given all of the changes. Oh, Benny's, okay. Read your
Alright,
addition.
so I gave testimony actually at the charter commission when we had your college. And basically I said that the ULURP process should require sign off of neighboring property owners before allowing zoning changes. And depending on how high or how dense the development is going to be, that's how larger of an area, radius area that you know, of getting sign off you have to get. Because those people that are directly affected, like in their testimony, you're literally affecting the value of their properties.
Yep.
And most people, their life savings are invested in their primary home, their
Okay,
properties.
so requiring the sign off of neighboring property owners on zoning changes. What's next?
The community board approval, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing
No,
as part of our approval process?
direct sign off of the neighboring property
That's
owners.
not gonna happen.
How do you want to define neighboring property owners? What radius?
that would be great.
It'll depend on how
It'll be-
large
it'll be
the
like-
building is.
Benny, I love you, we're just writing fan fiction now.
Okay, so there,
True,
I mean,
but.
if-
guys, the rate, okay, so required sign off of neighboring properties on zoning. Okay, so how about this, require the sign off of property owners
Like, I wanna put
within,
At least it's present.
require the sign off of property owners, require the sign off of property owners within 500 feet on zoning changes,
on all sides, 500?
Why not 2,000 feet?
within a 500-foot radius
Okay, 2,000 sounds good.
on all zoning changes,
I know.
except that the zoning changes, increasing density or height by more than 25%, a 2,000-foot radius. That work?
Wait, 25%
Okay,
of
so the
what?
owner of Ebbets Field needs to sign off on this, but not the residents. are gonna live there. Is that what you're saying?
Owner, property owner.
Not the residents on the thing. If Evans, if you wanna sell your house, your neighbors, and your other people right across the street has to agree, but the new developer is gonna be like, it should be signed off.
And do you wanna say require the sign off of a majority, a 75% majority, what?
I'd say a supermajority.
A supermajority of property owners within a 500-foot radius and all zoning changes, except that for zoning changes increasing density or height by more than 25% a 2,000-foot radius.
What about the people that live there, though, the tenants?
What are we
What
talking about?
tenants? If they sold a house.
This is Benny's proposal.
And we're thinking about like the big, large apartment complex,
Oh, this is a
like
tenant.
Adler,
sorry.
Field, in
Okay,
particular.
guys, this is not as crazy as you think. This actually, a version of this actually already exists in the charter, that for zoning text amendments, if something like 25% of property owners within, I don't know what foot radius, I forget, but it's, I think it might be something like, within like a block or two, sign a petition, opposing the zoning text amendment, then it requires a supermajority vote at the council. So this is not without precedent, okay? It's not without
You were
precedent.
saying a supermajority of business owners.
Property
Or
owners.
the
Property
property
owners.
owners, which
They're
is a different
directly
precedent.
affected, but they're the ones who are directly affected.
Okay, there already is something in the charter that is similar to this, although I think not as far reaching as what you're saying.
It's a little dicey, but it's interesting for sure. I mean, I could see how it would definitely help us a lot, in my neighborhood, a lot. But,
It's a wish list, but
Unless
hey,
you
nothing
got-
beats a failure but a try, that's what I say.
it could also, you know, prevent like, you know,
Suki, point of process.
Okay, so now with City of Yes.
Is there any way
How is this
that we cannot take a vote today on this, but still possibly take a vote before the general board meeting?
Okay, we're gonna get slaughtered if we, at the general board, if we don't vote on this now. So if you don't wanna vote on this particular, you know, amendment, fine, right? But I want us to vote on the document as a whole.
Why?
Without final?
We don't even know what the zone.
I would also add, just to Josh's point, I truly don't know all the edits that we've made. And I'm, trying to pay attention, I'm not that dumb. And it's like truly hard to
You're not
track.
dumb at all.
So do you wanna vote on the
You're not
frame
dumb.
without a
Thanks,
final?
Cheryl.
Stop it.
I wanna vote on the framework with the edits that we've agreed to make. I'll read through it,
do
okay?
we ever, I thought we made that Google group so we could share Google documents and.
And
Yeah, but you have to
And
have a
this was-
vote in person.
You have to have a
So-
vote in
That's what
person,
I'm saying,
okay?
like, could we
So,
come early to the general
let's-
board and take a vote? I don't know.
let,
No,
With
I-
Dante
so-
or something, but
the-
I
the-
really
this
wanna see
committee
where we
does
would
not-
land.
This
Yeah.
committee does not want stuff going out to the general board
But it
that they
has to
didn't
be
vote on,
viewed, we
okay?
can't vote without it.
So,
Yeah, it has to be public.
Yeah.
so
Yes.
let's,
Special session for the.
Okay, so looking at the first,
okay, so,
on the first page, which one are you,
I'd
which
have a special
paragraph are you
session.
reading?
okay, so, let me ask you a
For the
question.
meeting, for the
Who's,
exec meeting.
who's opposed to adding Benny's, who's opposed to Benny's addition? Raise your hand now.
It's not being opposed to.
I just don't know how it would
Or who
work.
does
I
not want to
think we
include?
have to agree on the language.
Who does not want to include it?
I'm just
now,
not sure if
as
that, is that a
is?
charter revision?
It
Is that
is.
part of
It
this?
is, because like I said, that type of proposal is already in the charter.
It's already in.
It's already in
So
there.
we can embellish on it. If we can add
So-
it.
So are you, so if there are people who are uncomfortable with adding it now, raise your hand. 1, 2,
I'm uncomfortable with
3,
making it about Benny's proposal
4.
specifically.
But it's not just.
Because it's not, there's so many different edits that we
Yeah.
talked about that we just,
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't
if
know
it's
what the
really-
final
Can we,
version
can I ask a separate question? Who would like to vote for this another point with the knowledge that this might diminish the advocacy impact if we vote for it later, but we would have a clear idea of what's in this, right? Those are the two options.
Okay,
This is our
when-
last meeting.
This is our last
No, I know that.
meeting,
And this, can we do,
I know
can
that.
we agree on an additional meeting right now?
I would happily come to a special
Zoom.
session before the general election, I mean, the general meeting
Fred
too.
already said that. Okay, I I'm willing to do another meeting. Who's willing to do another
Before the
meeting?
general
We
meeting?
need
When
at
is the
least,
general board
we
meeting?
need,
The general
When
board
is
meeting
the,
is on the 23rd.
general
So
board meeting is the
23rd.
24th.
We have to
can't
have this before
lose
the
a Monday.
executive,
Okay, we
right?
can't lose more than one person, or again, we're gonna get heavily criticized. Okay, so I need like 8 of you to agree that we're gonna do another meeting.
When
When are we
is,
looking,
when?
when are
One
we
week
planning?
today?
It'll have to be between now and the 24th.
23rd,
We have to-
23rd.
What about the executive committee
Say
meeting? Don't you have to have
Well-
something for them to review with the
That's the
executive
If you
committee?
17th.
If you get it done before the 22nd, then I'm up for it.
You know, I hear what I hear the impetus to pass something. However, we knew about this city charter revision for months. We're just now hearing that we have to pass a resolution, taking a
Today.
position on it. And I will tell you, I like to do my research before I go into anything. And so I would have spent a lot more time with that preliminary report if I knew we were coming here to vote, for example. And I just think, I understand why we want to say something and why we want to say something now. I just think either we simplify significantly and vote, or we make a special session before the general board meeting.
And we do the Monday the 16th. That's
I can
before
do-
that's before the
I can
executive.
do Monday the 16th.
Let's do Monday the 16th.
I can do it.
I can do it.
So you're gonna print everything out,
So
do the
everybody,
changes?
yes.
And then, yes.
yes, okay, all right. So let's take a vote on this, that we're gonna meet on Monday the 16th. Show of hands
At 6 p.m.
at 6.
6.
For an hour.
So
7.
let
Why is
All
it?
right.
Gotta get parking.
All right, 7.
Nicola,
6:30.
you good with this?
Can't get parking. Parking starts at 7.
Is there any other day that week that you can do?
Okay, now
Maybe we
before
should
we,
definitely do
so we gotta ask the office because we have to hold this vote in public.
Yeah, and we have to put a notice
Yes.
and
And
an
we have to
agenda and invite,
Yeah,
that's their job.
I don't think there's anything else on there though.
16, 17.
Yeah, that'd be solid.
Preparing for the
Oh,
executive today.
economic development has a meeting on the 16th.
Yeah, they've been meeting on Mondays.
Economic development
I
has a
mean,
meeting from 7 to 8.
They used to not meet, I think, on Mondays, but they have.
But they, yeah, on the
we can meet in the
16th,
back.
yeah, we can meet it in the front.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, economic development has. What is economic development? What's that about?
Business,
They're actually a fun committee.
supporting
she
small
says
businesses.
yes, but it
They
has
have
to be
like bar
7.
parties and stuff.
Well, economic development says 7.
Well, yeah, but there are 2 rooms
Okay,
here.
so yes, we can,
Fine.
all right, then good.
Okay,
Let's do the
so,
16th.
let the record reflect that everyone except Max can come on that day.
Maybe
Um, We hope you can come, but we understand.
No, I definitely cannot, if that's
Okay.
right.
Send your feedback,
Huh?
send your
Yeah, jump
feedback.
into the.
Jump in,
line.
okay.
Yeah, send your feedback,
Can I feedback?
okay? So,
Then your quasi vote.
You can dial it.
are we gonna try and vote on Joshua's proposals for the zoning framework, because I think they're very important too. And these have been out there for, no, this is for the zoning framework, where, so
This is right
Joshua's-
here, it says good
Oh, I see
afternoon.
it.
Okay,
Did we talk
So-
about this the last meeting?
no, we did not. I mean, Joshua's proposals and my comments have been out there since May the 13th, okay? But now we need to vote on them. Guys, he's revised it somewhat.
Yeah, and Suki, thank you for also weighing in and contributing a lot of the language. And I think we hope the revisions reflect the conversation we had when we talked about it. Being more specific about what it would look like to ensure tenant protections. Being more specific about MIH option 3, affordability. What else was there?
Really just to say that these tenant protections, right, we're not per se linking it to rezoning. We're not saying, oh, we need to get a rezoning of the neighborhood and then we'll get tenant protections, right? In some cases, There are areas that were already upzoned, like the Franklin corridor, where there's existing buildings that are being impacted, they're being emptied. And so we wanna see like some protections there immediately, right? Long term, I spoke to the housing committee chair, they wanna take a look at asking for these tenant protections throughout the district. And then also in terms of, your proposal that when we're doing significant upzonings for residential housing, right, that there should be a requirement for affordable housing. And that's not to say, I should probably add something to say, that's none of this should be construed to mean that we support upzonings, contrary to what we said in the rest of the zoning framework, that we want everything to be contextual and pay attention to shadows. But these upzonings are being done, right? Like for example, 341 Troy, that piece of land was upzoned significantly with no affordability. So this is really about that, right?
Yeah, I would just add, you know, I originally was a lot more strong in the language in terms of supporting the development of 100% affordable housing on public land. You know, we had some discussion in the room and offline about that. I think this is a significant step down from where I was, but I think it makes a lot of sense to include, you know, all of the different things that folks might want to do with that land, and potentially still clarify that, you know,
When it
we support the
happens,
creation of
yeah.
housing when housing
Is
100%
being done.
affordable when it's
Right.
being done.
And
So
so
all
like
those lands
one-
were in our area.
And so one of the key things that Joshua reminded me is, for example, with the NYCHA development that's on East New York and Maple, because of City of Yes, they now have a considerable amount of as-of-right development capacity,
Right.
right? And so if residential development happens there, you know, we support it being 100% affordable, because the trend with NYCHA has actually been for this infill to be market rate or mixed income, and that's been a source of, you know, like, real concern to the community and the tenants there. So, and to be honest with you, I think the conversation in, under this administration is more likely to be, we want market rate development on NYCHA housing campuses. And so I think this is an important statement to have in there.
I'm
And-
not necessarily opposed if it helps people, if it helps fill some of that budgetary
Right.
gap that
Yeah.
That's
NYCHA
what
has,
they're-
and that's why they would do
That's why
the
they're
mixed thing. But
saying
again, we're trying to get
But
some,
that's-
Yeah,
we're trying to signal the types of affordable development
Right.
that could be useful.
Right.
And so
But
I'm
that's-
fine with it as it is.
and we know historically that these 100% affordable developments often include, you know, AMIs at 80, 100, 130,
Right.
160,
Right.
so, you know.
It's just their
As,
excuse
you
for-
know, zoning changes or dispositions of public land, including NYCHA state or federal owned land, should go through a full public engagement and environmental review process, beginning with our community board, requiring public debate and transparent approvals by democratically elected bodies. So to speak to, you know, the concerns with the state-owned land, it's not going through ULURP, but I think we should be pushing our state elected officials that it should nevertheless go through a much more democratic process than what is the case, which that ESD does, which is they basically do whatever they want, the public authorities control board votes on it, the ESD directors who are not elected vote on it, and we don't even really see or understand the changes that are happening, right? It didn't come through the community board, right? And then like changes were made all along the way, like you know, Diana Richardson did her civic minded group for a couple of years, and what that group said yes to was very different than what came out of the general project plan. It was much smaller, and nobody could figure out like how, why, or who approved all of these successive increases in the number of units. So that transparency, I think, is really important. You know, like with Atlantic Yards as well, I think there was really a lot of concern that rather than going through a public ULURP process, it was, just done by the state, like they just took the land and did whatever they wanted, and now they're not getting affordable housing, and, ESD isn't even penalizing them, and blah, blah, blah. So that's that, faith-based land, we're not saying that they have to develop it for residential housing, or that we wanna give them upzonings, but if they choose to develop it for housing, or if they sell it to somebody who's gonna develop it for housing, then it should be affordable, because they've not been paying taxes probably for decades.
That makes sense, that's a good one.
So that's,
Are we voting on this?
I'd like to, I mean, as an addition to the zoning framework.
I mean,
So the
tonight-
only part we're voting, I'm trying to figure out where,
Is the,
Yeah, it's because it's
It
it's
starts
the beginning,
from
and then we
here.
had comments that I'm not sure what is
Okay.
getting.
it ends here,
Change.
this is the end of the most recent version.
Yeah.
And then
Because there's
everything
like
after that
comments from
onto it.
Suki.
No, that's not what we're voting on. Joshua.
Okay, so you made the changes to the
Yeah.
actual
Yeah.
text here.
So here's this is all of this beneath here, Tuesday, May 13th. You could think of as the initial and supporting conversation
Uh-huh.
that led to the version that's on
That's
Out of
on
the
the
top.
first
Okay.
page.
first
Oh, I
and
see.
three,
It's like a layered
orders.
email.
Actually, let me
Yeah.
ask Mia to print out the original zoning framework.
So this is what we're voting on, this from,
Yes, everything.
good
up
afternoon to all to
Yeah,
here.
that's right.
Okay, because I was getting confused with it, because I was fine with the
Yeah,
text
I
part,
thought
but
the
then I was like,
revisions
okay,
were
what-
after.
What are we changing on this one?
I agree with Nicola.
Another question I have is the language sort of exempting enlargements to single-family homes for use by owner occupants and their families. Just sort of what the impact of that be? Are we exclusively talking about if someone has a lot and a home there and they wanna build, maybe add make it bigger?
Yeah.
But not necessarily in a way that's like adding a unit or something like
Yeah,
that?
exactly, because we actually have had those requests at this board, where homeowners who have large families wanna be able to expand the house. There's a homeowner who had a disabled son, she wanted to add a bedroom on the ground floor, so that he could have wheelchair access, but the zoning, they're in R2 zoning, which literally doesn't allow them to do an inch. In some cases, if it's only a few people, a variance is the appropriate thing, but what if you do get a block where half of them wanna do it? It, doesn't make sense for BSA to hear 25 variances. It should, that's where some type of a rezoning makes sense.
Well, they could pretty much do, and at least in my neighborhood, with our zoning, R6, they can build pretty big additions already.
Yeah,
Right.
so this doesn't,
They're on the one block,
so
that's
this
an R2.
doesn't apply to your
Yeah.
block, right?
This
But
is
there-
R2.
Yeah, this doesn't apply to your block, but there are blocks that are R2, R4, where they can't do that.
But then they wanna rezone, which would then,
I think
city
it should be
planning would
spot.
broaden it out and include our blocks as part of that rezone.
Yeah, I think it should be spot for zoning.
What do you mean?
Individual requests.
Variances. Right, so like I said, if it's like a handful of them, variances make sense. But if there's like 25 of them, BSA is not gonna hear this. BSA is gonna recommend that you do a rezoning. So, this really is just in there so that the proposal that zoning changes require affordability doesn't impact those situations, right? We don't want it to. I think we talked about that not making sense if you're just talking about a small,
Addition for the folks that already live there.
Yeah.
So,
I still don't know
mm,
if we need to state it so explicitly, but
Yeah, I agree. Like, why?
but again, I think it's just a point of clarification that it would be fine if
Okay.
it remained in there. It is a little you know.
So what,
I
so
think-
Nicola,
So-
what
It's
is,
in the weeds a little, I don't know if anybody, we barely understand it.
Nicola, what is it that you're objecting to?
With the exemption of enlargements, paragraph.
For single family homes? Okay, so what I'm saying is like, what happens if, you know, a block that's in an R2 district, right, where they have, for argument's sake, 2,000 square foot townhouses, they're not allowed to build an inch because their zoning says they can only go up to 1,000 square feet, right? They would all like to add, you know, maybe 500 square feet, maybe 1,000 square feet, something like that, right? That shouldn't trigger an affordable housing requirement. But if you have a 10,000 square foot lot where they're going up, you know, they're
Is it single-
tripling the amount that they can build, that should, and it's, you know, like multiple units, like it's gonna be, you know, a 15 or 20 unit development, that should trigger an affordable housing
So
requirement.
is it the fact that it's a single housing, a single family house, or the amount, the percent change to the size of the building? That triggers the affordable housing, I think it's more of the percent change.
I think
I
it's
could have a
both.
two-family house and decide I wanna add 500 feet or whatever. That shouldn't trigger affordable housing for
Not if it's as
me.
of right. Not if
But it's not, I'm just talking,
Oh, okay.
you know, in generalities.
okay, fair enough, So,
Because you're getting this is basically
yeah,
tailored to the R2. We have,
Okay.
one block.
okay, so fair enough,
It's
so
not
with the
that-
exception of enlargements to, how about 1 to 3 family homes?
Well, why wouldn't you just limit to like zoning, like anything under 4 or 5 would be exempt? Because it's not gonna apply to smaller zoning areas anyway. I mean, under, you know, R5 or R4, you're not, I don't even think we have to apply in these
Okay,
Oh,
affordable housing values.
so hold on, so Nicola is saying, if it's a relatively small enlargement, so do we wanna like state a percentage? Because in fact, like owners actually can apply to the city planning commission for what are called de minimis waivers, which under the old zoning code, I think it was up to 15% of the FAR. Under, now with City of Yes, it's up to 25%. That was a very controversial, provision. So these will be provisions that go up to the city planning commission for a waiver, but don't come through ULURP, they don't come through us. So is that something that we wanna give an exemption to?
Here's what I'll say, I think the main way that this affordable housing would be laid on is
Okay.
through the MIH program,
Okay,
which applies to,
10 units and above.
yes. So I don't think it's necessary to be that specific, because the only way anybody's doing deep affordability is if they use MIH. Unless, you know, they're that benevolent, eating into their profit margin, et cetera.
So the problem I have with that, right, is let's say you have like a relatively small lot where somebody is, you know, 2,000, 5,000, something like that, where somebody wants to build a condo, and now they wanna build a bigger condo, right, and they cook up some reason to get a variance. Is that okay? It's, you know, and they're gonna build exactly 9 units of like 3,000 square feet each, or 2,000, you know, like, that's not okay to me, like, I wouldn't want to approve that variance, and I think there should be some way of signaling that, you know, what you're asking for is not de minimis, as Nicola was saying. I agree with Nicola that it's the amount that of increase that you're asking for that matters.
Can we just maybe write modest changes,
Okay.
and that can just be the,
So,
and we don't pick out a number and units or a percentage, because we go back and forth with all sorts of hypotheticals.
I still think the 1 to 3 family is important, right? Because when you get to 4 and 5 families, then you're talking about potentially the small condo buildings, you're talking about commercial landlords who wanna add a unit,
And that's when regulations change as well, when you go from 3 to 4.
Yeah.
But that's what
Okay.
happened with 703 Midwood. You have 2-family homes there that's like this, and this big huge glass house that's mixed use, because he put 1 residential and everything else was, medical. And the house, it's glass, takes up everything, and that's what's gonna go on. It's only 4 stories,
Right.
but he put one residential to eliminate having to put any parking.
So,
So one residence and all the rest is commercial medical.
All the rest is medical.
Yeah, he built as of right. What's the
It
zone?
was an R6.
R6.
So
how
that,
about
Nothing-
this?
nothing's gonna stop
How about
that.
this? With the exception of de minimis enlargements permitted through the existing variance or waiver procedures, any zoning changes, right? Because like I said, when you go through the existing
Areas.
variance procedure, does that, I think de minimis kind of like should cover the concerns.
This was the original one from last year that was done?
Yeah.
Or actually, you know what, instead of de minimis, how about with the
Yeah, so
exception of
From
minor,
last year.
Yeah.
with the exception of minor, enlargements permitted through the existing variance or waiver, through the existing ESA variance or CPC waiver procedures. Any zoning changes that allow for additional residential FAR or conversion should mandate deep affordability. I mean, I think a lot of what we're objecting to is actually covered by some of our other zoning principles where we're saying that we don't want these super out of
Right,
context
exactly,
buildings,
exactly.
right? The real idea is to capture larger significant developments that are asking for big zoning increases, right? That somehow they don't have to do any affordable housing.
Right, exactly. So do folks feel okay to take a vote? I'm happy to make a motion
One
to
apartment somewhere.
add this language to our zoning framework.
Yeah. Second.
I missed the question.
Okay, are we ready to take a vote?
I second. Josh,
Second.
yeah.
That's the question.
I didn't go far.
So let me first take attendance. Cheryl?
Here.
And how do you vote?
I didn't even read the
Okay.
first one. I did-
I'll take
I just got
attendance and
this.
you read it. Okay,
We're not
Cheryl,
voting on that now, just a change.
About, yeah. just
John?
change.
Not here.
Nicola,
Here, yes.
Max,
Present.
Esteban, absent. Hector,
Yeah. Here.
Benjamin,
Here.
Joshua,
Here.
Teresa,
here,
and Suki Chong. I am here as well. Did I call everybody? Did I call you Max?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Did you call John?
no, John
I
didn't
did call John. Okay. So, are we ready to vote? A motion was made and a second.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm a yes.
I'm a yes.
You're a yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
John is a
Yes.
yes.
This is on this?
Yes.
This is on.
No, no.
This being added.
Yes.
But it's gonna be with the changes that we just made.
Yeah, so there's a note
Single
here, this
family.
is flagged to be added to the section on demolition and redevelopment, the tenant protection stuff. And also a third section titled community benefit, which I wanna talk about that title too, but for now, I think.
Is there any way we could do this in Google? Not this one, but in the future, I'd really like to do it on Google Docs, because I could just sit here and look at the revisions as they're done, like all of us could in a
Okay,
meeting,
we can-
instead of on pieces of paper, would be really helpful for me. And I'm sure everyone else.
Okay, we can,
Not this, but let's do that in the future, please.
you mean like in real time in the meeting?
Yes, yes.
We can try.
We could
Maybe
share
we could put it
one,
on the
We
TV or
can
something.
try if we put
that's
it up
better.
on the overhead.
and we could do it like.
That was the whole point of the Google group, that we'd be able to edit
together.
Have an
Well, people
edited
have to
full version.
participate, I mean, like, these proposals
well-
have been out there for.
But it isn't on a Google Doc, it's just, responding directly.
Yeah, but
Google
nobody
Doc.
even responded. Nobody even responded. Okay, but anyway, look, we're in the middle of
Oh,
voting.
yes.
Vinny is a yes. Hector is a yes.
I said yes. already.
Cheryl
I haven't read anything, so I abstain.
abstains. Teresa,
I already voted.
how did you vote? I'm sorry.
Yes,
She said yes.
Okay, so the motion passes. We have 8 yeses, 1 abstention. Yay! Congratulations to everybody. Okay, now we have something that's really important to some people, so please stay.
Is it this one,
This,
land use committee, with regard to state attorney AG?
yes.
Can I just make one quick question before we move
Yes.
to discussing like the public? The community fair has been moved, right?
Yes, to the 28th.
So if we still need slots, people to sign up for slots, I'm now gonna be around on the 20th, so
Perfect.
I'd be too.
Okay.
I'm not either.
Some of those.
Perfect.
I'm out of town again.
Okay, so, I think 12 to 1 and 11 to 12 are covered, although I can switch a room with people. So if you're able
I
to
can
do
do
the
early.
10 to 11,
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Are you ready to go?
All right, motion for CB9 land, who's bringing this forward, this motion? Please read it.
Alright, motion for CB9 Land Use Committee. With regards to New York State Attorney General's future determination whether to approve the sale, use, or other disposition of the Kingsbrook Synagogue and other land at Kingsbrook Jewish Medical Center, which is part of One Brooklyn Health, which may have significant environmental impacts on the community. Community Board 9 Land Use Committee requests the New York State Attorney General to provide local community board with, number 1, disclosure of future development plans of said project, so that the community is not in the dark about the cumulative effects of this project and other nearby pending vital broken projects, King Rose Lake, Utica Crescent, and Kingsbrook Estates. Number 2, any environmental assessment form or environmental assessment statement relevant to said project required by SECRA. 3, 45 days advance notice, such as the 45th day of such advance notice shall be on or after October 1, 2025.
Is there a second?
She
I
has to ask.
second.
She has to ask first.
Okay. Any questions, discussion? Jay?
Yes. So what this is, Kingsbrook, One Brooklyn Health is, they're gonna be selling land of a not-for-profit. The way it works is, the New York State Attorney General can sign off on this without telling anybody on this, no notice or anything on this. It's gonna come to her in terms of the sale of part of the land. The north of this, many of you will remember Kingsbrook Estates did the same process. There were 2 prior sales of land of Kingsbrook Jewish Medical Center, and they were both Vital Brooklyn projects. So the community didn't know about it, there's very little rights on Vital Brooklyn, and before you know it, there's a tremendous project that's coming. The first 2 projects were by Monadnock Development. If I had to guess, I'd guess that this 3rd project will be another project, like around 300 units, something similar. Those projects, when it happened, there was an environmental assessment statement for Utica Crescent and also for Kingsbrook Estates. We saw it after it happened before. The only thing I'm not asking that you vote for it or against it. What it simply says is, we want to know, when, we want disclosure. Once the Attorney General gets this to approve this administratively, means just in her office, we want to know disclosure of what's the development plans. Is it gonna be all $1 million, $2 million mega mansions? We want to know. Or is it gonna be something else in terms of density? So we want disclosure of the development, number 1. Number 2, we want to see the form. There's a form that's gonna be submitted, because when the Attorney General makes it, has to approve something, that is secret. She has to make a decision to approve it. And she's gonna give either an EAF form, or they'll call it an EAS. And the 3rd thing is, we want 45 days notice in advance, except for on or after October 1st. What this means is, if they submit it, and if on July 1st, the Attorney General gets it, 45 days will be August 15th, and then we're out of luck. So what we wanna know is, we want 45 days notice when she gets this, but the 45th day will be after October 1st. So we can't get screwed by this being in the middle of the summer, which is something that happened before. The reason why I think this is important is this community board, on the committee level and other level, has done nothing for Vital Brooklyn and East Flatbush. There have been no motions from committees or from the, that have spoken to Vital Brooklyn, none.
That's bullshit,
Oh,
Jay.
no, let me continue the comment, please. There have been no motions. The only motions that have come are from the general board by Yaakov Berman, which was on the floor. And the second one also was where there was another motion that Benny made. There's been none. East Flatbush is a disadvantaged community, according to, as it's titled. That's a minority community that's low income, and I appreciate everybody talking about, you know, the theoretical and everything like that can affect it, but there's a fire going on. So all that I ask for is not to vote for it or against it. This isn't about affordable housing. It's just disclosure for a community. And the three things right there is, we want to know what the plans are, we want to see the EAF form, and we want to see the 45 days in advance so we don't get screwed during the summertime. That's it.
And may I say something before?
Yes.
Just as a FYI, I do live across the street from where Vital Brooklyn is coming. Across the street on the other side are 4 buildings that went up unbeknownst to the neighborhood. 4. That's why we're so awake now with what else they're putting. They already put 4 buildings up. This caused panhandling, and they said they won't use cars. There's no parking. We already have experienced the building of those 4 buildings without anyone letting us know that they were coming.
I don't think you have a pushback.
Okay,
Is
so.
Is there anything you could add to this?
Okay,
You wanna
so,
add to this?
No, we just
Just
we
want
just want
disclosure.
disclosure. We just wanna know,
Let's
be
vote.
and be made
Let's-
aware,
let's
I
that's
don't think
it.
it's unreasonable.
let's vote. Okay, Joshua?
Yes.
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 Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Reasonable.
Yes.
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 Okay. Motion passes. Vinnie, you had another motion with respect to Kingsborough Psych.
It's basically what I proposed at the last general meeting, but there wasn't enough time, so Fred tabled it. I wanted to make a motion that we should demand that the Attorney General convene was it a community,
Yeah,
Community
community
impact
impact hearing,
a community impact.
hearing, to discuss the Vital Brooklyn project and all its problems before signing off on it. So that she can hear it, because, the public has been pretty much just,
So that she can
railroaded.
hear from the community.
Right, because,
They did it for the Bronx and
Do we
they
have a
saved the high
second?
school. I second.
Okay. Okay, so we'll vote. Cheryl?
I second it, so yeah.
Yes.
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 Sounds reasonable.
Yes, sure.
yes.
Okay, motion passes. All right, so now let me just say, about my proposal, to add a section on environmental impacts for the zoning framework. This was written before I wrote up the Charter Revision Commission statement, so, some of what's in that statement speaks to this as well. Let me just read it out. The only effective way for CD9 to control and mitigate the serious environmental effects of development, both proposed and as of right, on our community, is through appropriate zoning and proactive planning requiring infrastructure to accompany development. The EIS doesn't study the cumulative impacts of rezonings that are happening one by one. EIS doesn't study cumulative impacts of as of right development that is happening. Almost all development in CD9 has happened as of right. EIS doesn't mandate mitigation, it only recommends it. It's very important to make sure the EIS is done properly, but the power of the EIS is limited without political follow-through. EIS measures only the change from existing conditions, so avoidance of impacts under an EIS framework makes dense areas denser and keeps very low-density areas low.
This doesn't really have a, whereas therefore, I'm not sure what we'd be voting on.
So the kind of therefore is what I was asking for in the charter revision statement, which is the mandatory environmental assessments every 5 years and a mandatory tie-in to allocation of resources through the budget process to mitigate the expected impacts of development.
I think it'd be fine just looping this into whatever the framework is, because this isn't necessarily zoning related in its current form. It's more about the broader impact.
land use
Yeah.
process.
So I don't think this is like a zoning change or a zoning framework.
So,
This one right here.
I know, but where is this, what is this going to be for?
so this is for the zoning framework,
So this will
right?
be added to.
Joshua's to the main one?
To the main
To the
zoning
main,
framework.
along with
Okay,
Joshua.
along with
Uh,
Joshua's.
If it
Put
makes
these
more
together.
sense
So
to you guys,
this
we can
with
consider.
Joshua's
Yes,
and
okay.
this.
Yeah, so if it makes more sense to you guys, we can consider this on Monday together with the charter revision statement, because, like I said, some of the proposals in the charter revision statement really speak to this. The ask about the mandatory environmental assessments for every district comes out of this.
I feel like, some
So
of the
what is this-
language
yeah.
around comprehensive planning could be
Right.
worked in here as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you, I'm trying to understand what you're trying to get at with this.
So what we're trying to get at is essentially like, and like I said, this was written like before I looked into the charter revision stuff. But like the ask in the charter revision to have mandatory environmental assessments for every neighborhood, together with the comprehensive plan, that sort of comes out of this, right? Because the existing EIS process is not effective for us. It doesn't address the cumulative impact of all the rezonings that have been happening one by one on Franklin. It doesn't mandate mitigations, it only recommends them. It doesn't, basically, it doesn't ensure that the city allocates resources to our district to mitigate the effects of development that are already coming. And it only measures the change from existing conditions, right? So when you have a very dense district like ours, they're like, well, you're already dense, you've already got transit, it's not that big of a deal. So like even when we talk about measuring something like socioeconomic impact or secondary displacement, our density works against us. If you look at how those seeker rules work, the density works against us. It has a 200 unit development has a much bigger impact in a very low density district than it does in an area like ours. And so like there are all of these drawbacks to the existing EIS process that I feel like the comprehensive planning and the regular environmental assessments for every district are really important. So like I said, we can, if it makes more sense, we can consider this together with the charter revision statement. But originally I was
just saying, with a tiny language edit, at the sort of top framing that mentions comprehensive planning,
yeah.
I think I'd be fine to vote on this tonight. I think this is straightforward.
But where does it's bigger than our zoning principles. We have no control over this stuff here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
This is the
But
wish
should we
list.
request
So
that the EIS include
So this is a
these?
different, what we have here is, okay, you wanna come and play in our sandbox, these are our rules. We can't dictate these rules. So this is a bigger or different conversation. I agree with it, it's something that's needed. Our zoning framework is not the place for it because we have no control. This has to be
A charter.
surfaced,
That's why.
whether it's charter or some other level. This is a citywide change to the rules.
This should be in the charter revision.
Yeah. If you want to put it in that.
Is it a charter, is it a charter vote? I don't know, it's
Actually,
actually,
because they're talking about, these mandated comprehensive planning, and so, yeah, let's link it to a mandated environmental assessment.
Yeah.
Even though we often don't trigger the usual criteria for environmental assessment, let's say that it has to be done for everyone anyway. And
some kind of cumulative impact, we've been asking for it forever, but we're at the point now, given the amount of development, anything more,
it
we
should
have
be,
to have a
it should be
cumulative
done,
impact.
yeah, it should be done everywhere regardless, right?
Everyone's been asking for it.
Yeah, and I think if you say that it's gotta be done for every district every 5 years. Alright, so, we're agreed that this goes in the charter revision. So we're good, we're done.
We have to vote on the
We under the minutes?
Oh, the minutes, oh my god, okay.
Way to walk out.
Motion to approve,
I have some, we
correction.
need to change. It says April, it needs to say May. And
No, it doesn't, it says May.
No, okay, when I
Yours?
printed it, it said it had
Oh, okay.
April 10th.
Okay.
And then on, under 2E, it has
Yes.
9 buildings, 9 new buildings,
Yes.
but the total is only 8. So I
Okay,
don't
great,
know.
so we'll change that to E.
No, but it is 9 buildings.
So is it a correct one or not?
Something's missing.
Right, there's something missing. The 2 of
Oh,
4
I see, in
stories,
my
that's
list.
fine, right.
Two
But,
or
but
four
to,
stories,
right, the 1 is 6
stories.
stories and 5 are 9 to 10, we need 1 more wherever it is. I don't know if it's the 6 stories or if it's a 9 to 10. Cause it has 9, but there's only a, count of 8. That's the only thing I said.
Do you have that presentation?
Don't know which one, I don't have the one to know which one.
Okay,
Let me see if I can get it.
okay, can we just say that change is noted and I will look into it and fix it before, sending them to Mia as corrected?
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, that is,
Can I get a motion?
Oh, go ahead,
Can I get a motion to approve minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, Max, seconded by John Kramer. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody against? All right, the minutes are approved. Thank you so much,
Motion to
everybody.
adjourn.
Just one quick check-in. I just know Cheryl and Benny sometimes weren't getting all the emails, and I've been trying to forward them, but are you two getting, you think, the emails from the board office? Yeah, yeah,
That's me.
Let me check.
for you.
Hey, yeah. Just join the board.
I got the one that's in the.
Did I forward
Having fun?
Yeah, the one.
Very much so.
that-
We need a motion
I
to
think,
adjourn.
I think.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Oh,
second.
second, oh my goodness.